Ooh, spooky pumpkins. Hello and welcome. In today's exciting episode, I will be taking this gorgeous Italian tweed in Halloween colours, orange and black, and I'll be making it up into a Chanel style jacket.
It's perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Perfect jacket.
So here we have the pile of the pieces for the jacket in this gorgeous Italian tweed. So I've got all the pieces I need for the outer jacket cut in the tweed, and I've also got all the pieces for the same pieces again cut in netting. And here I've laid down the netting, so the structural layer underneath, and I've just put each piece of the jacket over the top. So I've lined up the two pieces, but I haven't hand sewn them together yet. I'll do that once they're all sewn into a jacket. And because this tweed is very fragile and loosely woven, I've actually pinned the two pieces together. And then I pinned them together in the way that I'm going to machine sew them, and I also did the sleeves. So the next step was to machine sew them, so that's done. So the next step, I just turned it over and checked that everything was fine, and it is. So the next step is to make the shoulders. So you've got to pin the top front to the top back of the torso on both sides, and then just machine sew that. And now everything, all the machine sewing's done for the moment. The next step is to, every single seam I just sewed, I have to stitch, pin down the seam allowance on either side, split and pin, and then once it's all pinned, I just have to go along and hand stitch all of it down. So I will go and do that now. So after I'd pinned it all, I hand stitched all the seam allowance down on every single seam. So a couple of you who have asked for more information on how I then sewed. So the next step is to stitch the tweed to the backing fabric. And yeah, you just sort of pin it. And to do that, you put your hand inside, like underneath the fabric. So it's turned inside and you put your hand inside the fabric, and then you just sort of put one pin in through the backing fabric, then through the tweed, then back out through the tweed, then back out through the backing fabric, and you just do one needle at a time. And for stitching them together, I use two strands of polyester thread doubled over, so it ends up being 4 strands, just because then you can make your stitches just a little bit looser so it looks really natural, but you've got the it's like if you try and pick up a heavy bag of groceries with one finger, it's really difficult, but if you use your whole hand, like 4 fingers, then it's actually quite easy, and the load is spread over the whole hand, so it just feels easier. So yeah, that's why I use that. And so you just go along and do each panel until everything's done. And once I've finished, I just turn the sleeves out very, very carefully and check everything. Then the next step is to, while the instructions will tell you the next step is to do the lining, or either that, or you can just attach the sleeves. They usually tell you to do the lining first because you get more practice setting sleeves before you actually have to do the tweed ones, which setting sleeves at the best of time is very difficult. But even more so when you're using a delicate fabric like tweed. If you do, absolutely do your silk lining first just to get the practice in. But make sure you swap out your machine needles. With you really do need to use Microtex, the extra sharp needles, when you're using silk, just because it will butcher your fabric if you use an average just a universal one. They're not sharp enough. And then for my tweeds, I usually use a denim or a quilting one. You can use a universal if you are too lazy to buy more. But I'd recommend denim or the jeans or quilting cotton ones. Personally, I find them to work better. But yeah, definitely use the Microtex for your silk. So so everything, all the stitching to the backing is done. So the next thing is to set the sleeves. So I will do that now. And if you don't have any microtex needles, you can just hand sew your lining together. It's absolutely fine. I generally use a beading needle rather than, because they're sharper and thinner than a regular hand sewing needle. So yeah, but now I will set the sleeves. Okay, once I had carefully pinned the sleeves into the body of the jacket, then I stitched around with machine twice. The second time is just to reinforce it. Then I trimmed down the seam allowance just in the underarm bit and clipped the curves. Now you can see I've pinned the seam allowance, the remaining seam allowance, back into the sleeve, and I'm just going to hand stitch that down. It's clearer in this jacket that I made because the fabric is such a loose weave, and yeah, so I've just sort of pinned it back and it just helps hold the sleeve in shape. So now I'm just going to go around and with one hand inside the jacket supporting it and the other from the outside stitching it. I'm just going to stitch it, and then once that's done I do another row of stitches from the inside. Okay, so the sleeves are on. So the next part is to insert the lining, which I made off camera, and so I pinned them together, sewed it, and then I hand stitched the seam allowance down. And so it's all together now. So there's just the neckline to go. So I've turned everything inside out. So I've got the right sides of the lining and the right sides of the outer jacket together. And I'm just going to pin around the neckline. And then I machine sewed it. Again, I did it twice. First time, and then I checked it. And then I did another row just to reinforce it. Then I cut off half the seam allowance, so that when you turn it back in the correct way, it will sit correctly. And that's also why you notch the, clip the curves. And I've done it really obviously here. And yeah, you also just cut a little bit off the corners so that when you turn them out, they're nice and sharp. And then, so I went ahead and turned it out back to the right way. Now it's time to top stitch all along up the front, around the collar, and back down the front. So I've done that, and yeah, so we're basically done now. I'm going to bead this jacket, but if you're not going to bead the jacket, then the next thing is to pull the silk sleeves of the lining into the actual sleeves, and then you just turn up the hem of the lining and pin it into place, and do the same with the cuffs, and you just hand stitch the lining down. I'm going to leave it open because I'm going to do some beading on this jacket, but the actual jacket proper is finished, and here we go. It's so pretty. This is such a lovely Italian tweed, and it was really difficult to sew because there's like plastic raffia, chunky pom-poms, and all different things in there. And yeah, the machine doesn't like having, 30 different textures of yarn. But yeah, and this is the purple and green Italian tweed that I made this jacket right at the end of last year. And then I did the beading right at the start of this year in January. So yeah, I just thought I'd get it out and compare the two. It's also in sort of spooky Halloween colours. It's really funny because with this jacket, the Edinburgh one that I did last month, the Edinburgh Chanel one, I have got so many snarky comments about how heavy it is. And oddly enough, this purple one is, gosh, at least about 1.5, maybe 2 times as heavy. I've never had a single comment about how heavy those beads are. So I know toxic people aren't known for their logic, but I find it odd. But yeah, I do love this one. But yeah, it is quite, because of the way I make the trim, it's very balanced, but it's still a lot of weight for one person. It's fine for the next decade or two of my life, but I think once I get older, I'll probably have to par it down and do something that, yeah, or maybe just have lots of calcium so that I'm strong enough to wear jackets like that. But yeah, so anyway, the orange and black one is done, and it's looking really gorgeous. I think I'll do a much more subtle beading on that one though, something I can wear, for the next 40 or 50 years. So, or however long it is that we last, given global warming. Wow, that took a turn, didn't it? Anyway, thank you for watching, and yeah, And my jacket is done. I'm really happy with this. The tweed is so pretty. I think I'll hold off on beading the orange and black one just for the moment because there's this sewing challenge and I think I'll do that and just make a special episode and then I'll get on with the beading. So thank you again for watching and I hope you found it interesting. I really love working with these Italian tweeds. They are a pain because there's so many different types of yarns in there, but they're just beautiful.